And I have a question that was asked by Yazid. Yazid says, a husband and wife are married in community of property. The husband has purchased a property in the name of a company in which he is the sole shareholder. He wants to know, is the wife entitled to a half share of the company and the assets it holds? Bruno, can you provide Yazid with some assistance here?
It's an interesting question because everyone from a business perspective always learns that companies and trusts act individually from the people that actually own them or run them. And that is true for the most part. But what people need to realize is this isn't the first time that tricks have been used to try and bypass having to share assets or income with your spouse. Be it your current spouse or a spouse that there's a plan to divorce at some point or another, or you can see that something's on the rocks. And in fact, the courts have gone beyond this. So it's not just about.
We're trying to be so diplomatic. I'm sorry.
So, and it's not limited only to marriage. So there are case law that also deals with situations where people act in a certain way to prejudice creditors. But long story short, even if you're a shareholder of a company and you're the sole shareholder of the company, now remember in this particular instance, if you're the sole shareholder of the company, those shares fall within your estate. So it's still in community of property. So for all intents and purposes, those shares will be shared. If there is a divorce at some point or another, they will have to be tallied up. There will a quantification of their value, and the one spouse will be able to claim that value from the other spouse. So the most direct answer to the question is community of property means that the shares belong to the joint estate. The point I was getting at is some people actually start getting very smart with structuring. So they use trust, for example, to hide shares in companies that own properties. Now that starts getting a bit more complicated because it's not directly held by the joint estate. It's held by a trust. But the point that I was making earlier is the courts have seen this. The courts have identified that this is exploitation and abuse of the system. And the courts do have the power to pierce what we call either the corporate veil or the trust veil, whatever you want to call it, and ignore the existence of that trust for the benefit of case law now, the other spouse. And there's been creditors like banks, for example, that have also reaped the benefit of that. So that's kind of a very holistic answer, even though I was only asked about that much.
Thanks, Bruno. Really appreciate it. We're going to quickly move on to the next question. And this question was asked by Megan. Megan says, our complex needs to replace the doors on several units due to sun, rain, and some structural issues on the property. The body corporate wants each owner to cover 100% of this project, that being the replacement of these back doors, as Megan describes them. They also at the same time want to install awnings on the first floor units. And the owners of the first floor units will have to cover 50% of this bill. The other 50% will be paid for by the maintenance fund. Megan says, I consider the door replacement and the installment of the awnings to be maintenance matters. She believes that they should actually come out of the maintenance fund itself. And she wants to know, is this fair that they're expecting the owners to cover 100% of the replacement of the doors and then 50% for the awnings? Cilna?
Yeah, I was almost hoping Bruno is going to grab this one. Sectional title, and I am not always the best of friends, but it feels like a bit of a maintenance situation for me as well. But Bruno, please answer the question. I am at a complete loss.
I was actually checking quickly our YouTube page just to see when we answered this previously, because it sounds very, very familiar to a question that we had previously answered. So I remember that the way that the question was posed previously spoke more about the awnings being something almost entirely not decorative, but only protecting you know, the units at the bottom. So why would the units at the top have to pay for the units at the bottom? And I think that's along the lines that the question was asked. Look, I suppose the first thing that you need to look at is how this was actually dealt with from a body corporate perspective, especially more complex matters like this. Like, was there an AGM where this was actually discussed? Because there's common property where the body corporate takes care of it, and then there's one's individual property that only benefits that one person's unit. Sure, certain things like painting comes out of the general maintenance budget, but it's because it's the outside of the buildings, so there's a level of aesthetic, an aspect of you know, aesthetic and maintenance and waterproofing and things like that go behind it. So one here would have to look at the main reasons why these doors being repaired, why these awnings being installed. Is it just for the convenience of the owners at the bottom? Because then arguably I would understand why it's a 50%, because the body corporate would contribute a certain share because there has been whatever an inconvenience or something's happening that requires this, but the rest of it would be contributed by the owner because they're enjoying their benefits exclusively, as opposed to the rest of the complex that aren't. And I mean, it comes down to a maintenance question. Repair of doors might be a maintenance issue, but the installation of the awnings, are they really maintenance? What is the reason? Would the awnings actually help in any way? Because if they would help, then yes, maybe one could look at it as a measure of repair or long-term maintenance. But if it is just, for example, because you know the heat gets quite bad or the sun gets quite bad, then arguably I would say that it's more for the benefit of those owners, and they should probably be paying for it. The fact that there's a 50% contribution is actually quite a sweet deal. But yeah, like all the reasoning would have to be looked at.
Thank you, Bruno. This time, I promise I concentrated, because when you said we've had this one before, and I was still like, I have no idea where in the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act I'm going to find this answer. And you're like, but we've had this before. I realized I probably didn't focus. But no, when you started answering the question, I was like, I remember that one.
Yeah.
No, but thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Bruno. Thank you so much. And thank you to you, our viewers who've joined us. Post your questions, as always, I said, post your questions in the group. And you can do it in the comments as well when we go live, like Yannick did today. I hope that you all have a great week further, and looking forward to seeing you next week. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.
Guys.
Bye.